Powerwall 3 by Tesla Energy. You might be thinking, what's new? How much does it cost? And is it even worth buying? Well, you've joined me here today at Tesla in Manchester, where they've opened the store 2 hours early, just for me, so I can give you the inside scoop on all the things there is to know about the all-new Powerwall 3. This conversation is going to be so powerful. Let's go. So first of all, what is a home battery storage? Well, that's Powerwall 3, and that's there to store the energy that you use in your home, AC, to draw it up for demand later. Now, it can store energy in a few different ways. The most simple way is going to be from solar panels. This will connect directly into the top of the Powerwall and store that energy for later on, but it also does it in a couple of other different ways, such as drawing it in from the grid. So you might have a cheap night rate, like Octopus Go Intelligent that you use to charge your car, and you can use that to charge your home battery. Or it could well be for something a little bit more complicated, like a wind turbine. Let's start with the main difference between the Powerwall 2 and the Powerwall 3. They both have a 13.5 kilowatt battery, so nothing's really changed there between the two models. But what has changed is the battery cell technology. The Powerwall 2 was what's called a nickel manganese cobalt battery, and the Powerwall 3 is a lithium iron phosphate battery. Now, the big difference between the two is the fact that lithium is much more readily available and it's much cheaper to source, which is bringing the cost of a Powerwall 3 down. So another big difference between the Powerwall 2 and the Powerwall 3 is the charge rate. Powerwall 2 you could do 3.6 or you could do 5 kilowatts. The Powerwall 3 is just 5 kilowatts. Unless you add a DC expansion pack, of which that charge rate increases to 8 kilowatts, making it much quicker. So when you've got 2 packs, you've got that ability to fill them all that much more faster if you're on an off-peak rate. And it can also deliver up to 11.04 kilowatts as an individual unit, which is really, really quick. I think it's the biggest home battery storage you can get for a single phase solution in that respect. It really is very competitive. Now, another big change between the Powerwall 2 and the Powerwall 3 is the inbuilt DC inverter that can take up to 20 kilowatts worth of solar power that the Powerwall 2 just simply didn't have. Powerwall 3 is flood proof. Now, Powerwall 2 is really highly water resistant. I don't want to take it away from that at all, but the Powerwall 3 you can submerge in up to 60 centimeters worth of water. So if you're in one of these places in the UK or abroad that's prone to flooding, it could be a perfect partner for you. Both battery storage solutions had whole home backup. The main difference being if you're with the Powerwall 2, you would be limited to that 5 kilowatts. I mentioned earlier, whereas the Powerwall 3 will meet up to an 11 kilowatt demand, as I mentioned. The main difference between the two, you could pretty much run your home as normal with the Powerwall 3 without any real limitations. Aside from maybe EV car charging, you'd perhaps want to leave that until the power comes on. Both of the units have super low latency in terms of their ability to switch on to whole home backup. Now, both the Powerwall 2 and Powerwall 3 were capable of taking a 3-phase connection. They can only supply whole home backup to a single phase when they are connected, unless you install multiple units. One of the other big changes between Powerwall 2 and Powerwall 3 is the fact that with Powerwall 2, if you wanted a second unit, you had to buy a full second unit, which could be a little bit costly sometimes. Whereas with the Powerwall 3, you can buy what's called a DC expansion pack. Now, this is where you get an extra 13.5 kilowatts worth of battery storage, an increased charging rate as well, and essentially for a fraction of the price. So what we've got is a very similar, if not lower price in the Powerwall 2, doubling the speed of the inverter capacity, keeping the same in terms of the battery storage capacity. We've got the ability to add DC expansion packs. We've got the built-in solar inverter. Now, one of the things behind the built-in solar inverter is the fact that ultimately, because you can now direct connect your solar panels in and you don't need a third-party inverter, you've got that ability of bringing the whole cost of the install right down, because it takes much less time to be able to install a Powerwall 3 than it would have done a Powerwall 2 with solar. Later on, I'm going to be breaking down what I think you should be paying for the Powerwall 3 as well. So how long will a Powerwall 3 last? How long will it supply your home for? Well, I suppose that depends on what demand you have, whether you have a heat pump, whether you have quite a lot of electric items, but you can work this out yourself. So the Powerwall is capable of storing 13.5 kilowatts worth of energy. And what that basically means is, if I put on a 1 kilowatt load, it will last 13.5 hours. So if you look at your average daily usage, so you may well be a consistent, if you've got a heat pump, you might use 2 kilowatts an hour. So that might mean you've got a really high energy usage of 50 kilowatts a day. That gives you an idea of how long that Powerwall will last. Now, most of the time, from my personal experience, I've got a family of 4, I've got 2 girls, 13.5 kilowatts would easily last me an entire day. If I just charged up cheap at night, if my solar panels are covered in snow, it would last a full day worth of energy and offset me to a cheap night rate. Let's come on to one of the big differences of the Powerwall 3 versus its predecessor, the built-in inverter. Now, this is a DC inverter. So traditionally with the Powerwall 2, you would have to use a third party, what's called a string inverter. So let me briefly describe what this means. Solar panels would be on the roof. A third party string inverter would then convert this energy from DC, direct current that the solar panels generate, convert it to AC, alternating current that we use in our home. The Powerwall 2 would then pick this up, would convert it, store it in the battery, and then when you cook your tea later on, that power is delivered to cook your tea, which is brilliant. But that's quite inefficient, the way in which that physically works. Now, for some people, they might not have a choice. They might have a feed-in tariff system. They want to avoid penalising on any of those all-important payments. But for anybody who does have the ability, the DC inverter is built in. What this basically means is you can have up to 20 kilowatts worth of solar and it goes directly converting DC to DC. This is significantly more efficient. So much so that it's typically about 5 or 6% more than that process that's happening previously with the Powerwall 2. Again, you might not think that 6% is a great deal, but when that's 6% reoccurring day after day after day after day, it can make a massive difference in terms of your overall efficiency of the individual system. The DC inverter as well, as I mentioned, can have 20 kilowatts worth of solar. This comes via 3 maximum power point trackers. Now, if you're watching from over the pond, if you're over in America, then they also have a version with 6 maximum power point trackers. So this information is specific for the UK in that we've got slightly different safety regulations that mean we've had to reduce the number of maximum power point trackers that's actually in the inverter. So you can have, typically speaking, up to about 15 solar panels. This is based upon a 440 watt panel per string, effectively, at maximum capacity. Now, I appreciate the fact that this might not always be possible to reach the maximum because of your individual roof space, but the fact that you can have 3 power point trackers is a big game changer. Another big game changer is the fact of the voltage that the Powerwall 3 is capable of. A minimum of 60 volts to fire up. Now, that might mean nothing to you sat behind this lens. But a standard inverter fires up, typically speaking, about 150 volts. If each solar panel is 30 volts each, that means you need a minimum of 5 solar panels on an array. When it's nice and sunny, for that inverter to fire up and start generating energy. With the Powerwall 3's maximum power point tracker, remember it's got 3 of those, you can have a minimum of 2 solar panels. So if you've got a little bit of scraggly roof and you can build the scaffolding up and around, previously you wouldn't have bothered with that solar array. But the Powerwall 3 enables you to be able to maximise that roofing space. You can add an extra couple of panels on, wire it into the side of the Powerwall. You're not paying for any extra inverter or inverter space, and you can generate a load of extra energy over the next 25-30 years. Let's talk DC expansion packs. So first of all, in order to have a DC expansion pack, you have to have a leading Powerwall 3. You can't just buy a DC expansion pack. This is because the main Powerwall 3, the leader, has an inverter built into the top of it. Your following DC expansion pack is a little bit narrower, doesn't contain the inverter inside, and relies upon the leader to be able to supply it. Now, for every leading Powerwall 3, you can have 3 DC expansion packs. So you can increase the amount of battery storage you want in 13.5 kilowatt denominations, but for a fraction of the cost. So return on investment payback for the Powerwall, again, drastically reduces. Now, at launch, that's all you can have is 3 DC expansion packs on the main leader. But you can also have, this is based upon a single phase system, 4 leading Powerwalls. So if you think about this in terms of battery storage, you can have 1 leader, 3 followers, which could be 54 kilowatts. Now, if we add the additional 3 leaders, so at this point in time, we've got 4 leaders, 3 DC expansion packs, that will add up to a total of 94.5 kilowatts. It's total capacity that's available as of day one with the all-new DC expansion pack and Powerwall 3. Now let's get on to software and the software capabilities of the Powerwall 3. Let me go through how I think it's very, very powerful. Well, the first thing it does, it learns how you work and how you operate as an end user. If you've got solar connected into the DC inverter, it's got the ability of being able to do a weather forecast. So let's give myself a summer scenario. I've got lovely sun outside that's shining and gleaming bright. Powerwall's going to run the algorithm in the background and go, I've got a dead sunny day tomorrow. We're going to use 10 kilowatts and I'm going to generate more than that. I'm only going to buy a couple of kilowatts in the morning to allow for their morning brew. The solar comes in and that gives you enough energy stored into batteries so that you can cook your tea at night time. Thus you can run on renewable energy. Now as we blend more towards the winter, at this point in time you have snow sat on your panels. The Powerwall's got the ability of saying, hey, we're not predicted to be generating as much statistically tomorrow. So at that point in time, it will buy more energy in the night before than it did do in the summer, charge that battery up full so that you're running on your cheap night rate in the winter. The Powerwall, you can tell it this information. So let's say you've got a cheap EV rate at 7p, but you get 15p to export. It's capable of running that within the algorithm as well. Now you can actually run up to 4 different pricing tariffs. You can do super off-peak, you can do off-peak, you can do mid-peak, and then you can do high-peak tariffs. And what this basically means is you can tell it when it's cheap. So if you've got a point in time where it's really expensive, in order to be able to import it in, then the Powerwall will avoid that. It can discharge during the expensive period, charge again during a cheap period, and then discharge again during the expensive period to repeat that process time and time again. You might be thinking, I use 40 kilowatts a day. That's going to be a fortune from battery storage. You might find you only actually need 1 Powerwall in that scenario, which is where this software is really powerful. Storm Watch. This has the ability to be able to look at the Met Office and work out what weather warning is there. And if you've got a red weather warning and you select and enable this, the Powerwall will automatically force charge to give you a full battery. Say you live somewhere rural and in the event you go off grid, it could cause you big problems. The Powerwall is there ready and waiting with a super low latency whole home backup, and you can then last with a 13.5 kilowatt battery. Let's say you use 13.5 kilowatts a day, that will last you a full day off grid. Now, another great thing, if you do have solar and the grid goes down, but goes down for more than 1 day, if you've got solar power generating, then the Powerwall is capable of being able to keep you off grid. Effectively, if you had enough sunshine, so say I went off grid in April and I had enough solar panels, and depending on my energy usage, it technically would be capable of being able to keep you off grid virtually in perpetuity. Now, this is great if you're in a very, very sunny area, but I appreciate with England, this would technically only be possible from April through to October. But the fact that in the event that the grid goes down, if you reduced your energy usage and you could rely upon solar being off grid completely, that is a real game changer in terms of a product. So something else that's a big game changer is dedicated cell level heating system. So in the event that it goes really cold, the Powerwall's got the ability to run an algorithm. So it looks at what happened this time last year, it looks at the weather outside, it does weather forecasting, runs this algorithm in the background. So what this can do is bring the temperature of the actual battery up so that if you need a high demand, so you've got a heat pump, for example, and it has to meet that demand instantly, the Powerwall is ready to go. Now, the Powerwall can go down to -20 to +50. One thing they have removed, the difference between the Powerwall 2 and the Powerwall 3, is the Powerwall 2 had liquid cooling, the Powerwall 3 has air cooling. This is predominantly because you've got a little bit more space around the top of it. It's got the ability, because of this cell technology as well, to cool itself down much quicker, but it can still handle all these temperature changes really, really easily, and it really is a groundbreaking bit of kit. Warranty. Now, this is a big thing within the industry that you get a lot of warranty providers that'll go, it's got a limit of X number of cycles. This is where the battery fully depletes and charges back up again. And each time it does that process, that's classed as an individual cycle, depending on your manufacturer, because different people class cycles differently. Some of it class it from 50% and above, which can be a little bit naughty. Now, with the Powerwall 3, unlimited cycles over a 10-year basis. Now, if you are running multiple cycles in the day, there is a little bit of a fair usage policy that comes around that, so do check the individual terms and conditions. But what Powerwall are saying is, despite how hard you batter the living daylights out of this thing, if you run multiple cycles over, there'll be an energy retention of at least 80% at the 10-year mark. So let's talk about some of the other options. So I've briefly discussed having the ability to wire panels directly into the Powerwall. However, you may well be in a situation where you've got an old York stone roof that's just been re-roofed a couple of years ago and you think, you know what, I don't want any solar panels. Now, the Powerwall 3 can also be installed in a method called AC coupled. This is where you have your battery and you have what's called the gateway. I'll come on to the gateway in just a second. And what that gives the ability of being able to do is charge really cheap nighttime energy, store it in the battery for a later period of time. So if you, again, you've got EV car charging rates, a heat pump rate, an economy 7 rate, you can buy cheap energy in the battery and store it. And then when it's more expensive, the Powerwall can meet that demand. The other great thing about the Powerwall, if you've got a feed-in tariff system, this is something you'll really want to have a listen to. So you'll have a string inverter up in your attic. The Powerwall is capable in the AC coupled format of being able to track what that string inverter is doing, store it in the battery for a demand later on, maintaining your feed-in tariff payments and also giving you the ability to charge cheap nighttime electricity as well. The Powerwall 3, as I mentioned right at the start, can also work alongside wind, turbines and other sources of generation via its tracking system. So it's not just limited to solar or AC coupled in its format. So one of the parts that I've not mentioned so far is a part called the gateway. You currently need a gateway with a Powerwall 3. Now the gateway is what houses the contactor. Now this contactor enables you to be able to go off-grid if needed. So you can either push that in the mobile phone app, or it may well be that the Powerwall senses that one of the connection coming into your home has gone down, the contactor kicks in, and effectively you're then running on the whole home backup. Now this gateway is capable of working with both single phase supplies and 3-phase supplies as well. So effectively we can wire in 3-phase, track what the whole house is doing, and then the Powerwall can work on a single phase to be able to back individual home backups and meet the demand of an individual phase on that system as well, which is really, really good. If you have a slightly larger home and you have a 3-phase system, the Powerwall can work alongside that as well. And the gateway looks equally as beautiful. Let's go on to G98 versus G99, and one of the spectacular things about Powerwall 3. So whilst I mentioned it can buy at 5 kilowatts and demand at 11 kilowatts, sometimes the national grid doesn't quite like that. We've effectively got 2 types of application. A G98 application, which limits your ability to export to 3.68 kilowatts. Now this export can also be limited under what's called a G99 application as well, or G100 if they change that. Most inverters do not have the ability of being able to limit what they can export to the grid. In 1 kilowatt denominations, the Powerwall can be restricted within the software anywhere from 3.68 to 11 kilowatts. So if the national grid puts a limitation on your demand, say you've got 10 kilowatts worth of solar, but the most they can have for the local supply transformer, which is outside of your control, is 6 kilowatts, we simply click a button in the software, and the Powerwall inverter essentially morphs itself into a 6 kilowatt inverter. It is very, very clever the way it works. And for us as engineers, very simple and very intuitive too. So what I'm going to do now is break down the cost of what I think a Powerwall 3 should cost you in the United Kingdom. If you're enjoying the content so far, please don't forget to subscribe below. I'd also like to take this moment just to thank Tesla Manchester for getting out of bed a few hours early to help me film this content today. So let's firstly start with the cost of the Powerwall unit. This costs a total of £5,500. Apologies for my writing in advance, it's never been particularly good. So that's the Powerwall 3, and that's what a leading Powerwall 3, not a DC expansion pack. The next cost we have is going to be the gateway. They're £800. Let me spell gateway right to start off with. So we've got these 2 costs. Now that's going to total, just for the hardware, £6,300. What a lot of people don't realise is within the gateway is a series of other components. Now this is case specific, and you've got to speak with your engineer that you'll be instructing to be able to install your Powerwall 3 for these. There are individual circuit breakers that you're going to be needed. Perhaps, as a protected devices, internal wiring between the Powerwall 3 and the gateway. Now that comes at a cost as well. And typically speaking, that's in the region of about £300 to £400. That's taken our total cost so far to £6,700, and an engineer's not turned up yet. Now, I would expect an engineering team to be able to install these relatively quickly. They're a fast installation, but nevertheless, by the time you've loaded the Powerwall 3 up, you put it on the Powerwall 3 lifter, you've put it on the wall, we've brought the cable in, we've wired the gateway in, I would expect that will probably take our engineering team about a day to be able to install for a team of 2 because of the lifting. So let's put that cost at a further £500. That's taken us to a total of £7,200. The business has to make a profit, because otherwise those people in the office and the people that maybe book your appointment in, marketing to be able to get hold of you, I would anticipate that would cost about another £300. So at this point in time, I would expect, with all those costs considered, your cost to be about £7,500. Now, one other thing, just to note on this, there are some of the installers selling them at £7,500. One thing to watch for is that out of the box, some installers are just doing what's called a G98 application, which restricts the inverter's ability to be able to import, export, and meet your home demand to 3.68 kilowatts. So it may well have an 11 kilowatt inverter built in, but if you're not careful, that could restrict it. Now, in order to do a full G99 application, it takes often an engineer and more time. So I would anticipate, if you're having a G99 application done as well, allow a further £200 on top of that. So I would anticipate the total cost of a Powerwall 3 in the UK to cost about £7,700. Now, from what I've seen from the research that I've done, this is about the typical cost that we would charge to install a Powerwall 3. What I've seen from other installers, this price can vary if you're having the limitation applied to your inverter to £7,500, or it can go anywhere up to about £8,000 in terms of a window. I think that's a very fair cost for the Powerwall 3. Earlier on, I told you I would give you my very own engineer's opinion at what I thought of the all-new Powerwall 3. So we've got 5 different sections, and we're going to rate them an overall score out of 10. So each one can have 10, and then we'll give you the average. So let's start with technology. A lot of tech, and I mean a lot of technology, is built into the Powerwall 3, but there's one little thing that's missing. Can be made up for with the Net Zero app. And this is the ability for, if you've got, say, like Octopus Go Intelligent or another intelligent EV rate where the time shifts, currently within the Powerwall 3 app, it doesn't have the ability to track. But Bush, remember all the unique features that we have on the Powerwall 3. We've got individual cell heating, the ability to get down to 20 degrees to plus 50 degrees, a built-in inverter, the ability for it to charge at 5 kilowatts, discharge at 11 kilowatts. There's so much packed into this Powerwall that I have to drop it half a point, because it currently, although I believe it'll come via a future software revision, and they are working on the API as we speak, I would give that 9.5 in terms of its technology. Performance, personally, I think it's unparalleled in comparison to its competitors. Again, can charge at 5 kilowatts, discharge at 11 kilowatts. There currently isn't a great deal of competition out there for the Powerwall 3. They are definitely leading the race when it comes to individual performance, whole home backup, and it's the whole home backup's latency that I really, really like. So it's the ability that when it goes off grid, it's instant. You don't even notice the light flicker, from my personal experience. Performance, for me, solid 10. Warranty. 10 years unlimited cycles, I think, is a pretty competitive warranty. There are a couple out there with a 12-year warranty, but I think in terms of being able to market lead, it is brilliant. Now, one of the things that's brilliant as well, that isn't mentioned in a lot of the warranties, is the fact that this is a parts and a labour warranty as well. And what I mean by that is, effectively, in the event that your Powerwall or the gateway fails, and these are the only 2 parts that are physically covered, Tesla themselves will cover the cost of an engineer to be able to replace that part, so long as, and there are terms and conditions that come with this, that it wasn't the fault of the engineer and it was genuinely a failure with Tesla. Now, from my experience with warranties, we've installed hundreds of the Powerwall 2 and a good number of the Powerwall 3s now as well. I know we've got nearly 50 of them on order as it presently stands. And what I know from this, from personal experience, I own a Powerwall and also having installed Powerwall as part of our business, they don't really fail, if I'm completely honest. I've had one unit fail, and that was a Powerwall 2. And when it did fail, Tesla were really good. They paid us the cost for our engineer to be able to go and swap that unit out. And moreover, they gave that customer the brand new Powerwall 3 as well. So I think when it comes to it, and that was delivered before 12 o'clock the following day. It was epic the way in which they dealt with their warranty. So I, again, have to give it a solid 10. Affordability. In comparison to the Powerwall 2, I think they've got way more affordable. If you'd have asked me my rating on the Powerwall 2, we'd have probably gone for a 7.58 because you've got to install the inverter and all the other clunky parts that come with it. But by way of affordability on the all-new Powerwall 3, I think it's really good. You get a lot for your money, if I'm completely honest with you, in comparison to the other competitors that are out there, and it's a real solid technology. It's a little bit pricey, so I'm going to go for 9.5. Coolness. It's always a subjective opinion. I always think that Tesla product can sometimes be a little bit Marmite, and this is my own personal opinion on this. Other people go, it's ugly. Personally, I think it's a beautiful piece of kit, if you don't mind me saying. I think the powder-coated edges are epic. I think the new glass front is wicked. And when it's all plugged in and wired up, the T for Tesla lights up. It is a real great addition, I think. Personally, I think it's the coolest thing that's out there. So I'd give that solid 10. Overall, in terms of a score, if we add all this up, I think we're looking at a solid 9.75 out of 10. So the only thing that they could potentially do is drop the price ever so slightly. I don't think they will. And I think it is appropriate for the size of it is. And I think the only other thing that they could do is just have that little piece of tech integration that doesn't rely upon the third-party application. And to be honest with you, for this point in time, I think they made a near perfect product.